Hello Internet, how you doing? My name is Jason Torchinsky, and as you know, I'm a guest blogger here on Boing Boing this week. And one of the things I'd like to talk about is something I hope you will find fairly interesting. It's about a type of obsolete display technology that nobody uses anymore. And in fact, you could probably have a lot of trouble finding anyone who really cares about this at all. But I like them and I find them interesting. And because there's so little information about them on the internet in general, I thought I could maybe justify actually taking a few moments of your time here, showing you some of these things in this little video and letting you see what I'm talking about. So just to clarify what I'm talking about here, it's a display device, and I personally love display devices. That they're basically display devices, anything that a machine uses to communicate with you visually, and these can be gauges or needles or numbers or LED displays or anything like that. And the things I'm going to show you today are these devices for displaying words or numbers or things back in a time when doing that kind of thing was actually quite tricky. Like for example, back in like the 50s and up, when they started actually build a lot of machines that had to display numbers, they often used things like Nixie tubes. And I think everybody here is probably familiar with a Nixie tube. It's essentially a little vacuum tube with these metal filaments inside it that are in the shapes of the numbers 0 through 10. And they're actually very cool, and I'm sure most people who read Boing Boing probably already very familiar with Nixie tubes. In fact, I'll be willing to bet that it's probably the greatest audience of people familiar with Nixie tubes under the age of 65 to 70, because these things are way obsolete, but they're still pretty cool and people love them. Now, the problem with them was, though, they were fairly expensive and kind of power hungry. They sucked a lot of power to run these things. So people were always coming up with other ideas. Eventually it all went down to the standard 7-segment display like you see on a clock here. And that's the standard 7-segment display, oops, that we all know and love, that you see, it's the 8 and the different digits light up. Now these didn't come around until they weren't really in common use until the 70s. I think the Apollo program kind of was one of the first applications of these things in the more modernish kind of form that I know of. So these were these were eventually what took over everything, but there was a long period of time before people could use these things, so they were still coming up with all kinds of things. Those flip card displays you may have seen before, or sometimes it'd be as simple as a light lighting up under a number. But if you're trying to do large numbers, if you're trying to do 1 through 100, you can't have one of those elevator style strips and have 100 lights on there. It would just be chaos. So one of the ways that people came up with to display things was with something called one plane displays, which is what this is right here. And these things came in all different sizes, and they're really interesting little objects, little pieces of dead, forgotten technology. My friend Tom Jennings gave me these. He was cleaning out his garage, and he had these lying around, and he gave them to me because he always has a lot of really good stuff in there. And the way these things basically work is it's a unit. You can see they come in all different sizes. This one does numbers like 0 through 10, just like 0 through 9. And the way it works is there's a display at the front. There is a series of light bulbs at the back, and you can see there's a series of holes matching up with these light bulbs. And essentially the machine or computer basically indicates a single light bulb to light up, much like it would if it was just a simple board with a light bulb under a number. But what's different here is that light bulb is actually projecting through a tiny little like film image onto a screen. And I'll show you what this looks like, because the effect is really nice. So here's one. This one actually was taken, interestingly, out of an old slot machine. So these were used in like the gaming industry in slot machines. So you see when these things light up, let's see if I can get a good angle here, you see the images are lighting up there. And you notice, these aren't pixelated images or anything like that. It's basically like a little hand-drawn image almost, like a little, almost like an animation cell that's being illuminated by the light bulb in the back and then projected onto the screen. And you notice they all show up in the same place. So if you're showing numbers, it's not like you have to have a separate area for each individual number. Like a Nixie tube or an LED digit, the numbers would just show up in the same place, and you could have, it could work in like any kind of numerical readout. And what's nice about these is they have this really nice kind of soft focus about them, and the images are of really high quality. I mean, look how nice that little bell looks, or that little watermelon. I mean, what kind of slot machine had bells and watermelons? But I guess they did. And they're very easy for the computer or the machine to actually set up and use, because it's just a matter of lighting up a single bulb, and then the machine handles, the internal mechanism of the one plane display handles displaying the images at the same place. So let's look at this big one here. And because I don't have this one hooked up to a power source, I'm just going to synthesize it with this little light. And if I shine this through here, you can see, look, there's a nice number 5, and it's in a nice, like, Futura Sans font. There's a 6, a 7. Let's see, where's a nice, let's find an 8. Look at that nice 8. Oh, where's my 8 again? These things are all over the place. 9. But as you can see, it makes a really nice image. This one I'm actually planning on turning into the speedometer for my old 73 Beetle. I think it'll be really cool. But these, this one was made actually out in North Hollywood, right nearby where I live. The other one was made in, I got one that was made in Van Nuys. This one from the slot machine was made in the UK. Only a few companies made these things. This is a little tiny one that was used. It's apparently, it has instructions, must have been from like an old printer, a line printer of some kind, but all in German. Papier, or maybe French. I can't remember. But if you, I don't know if you can see into it at all, but you can kind of see how each one has the little scrim, the little film that's actually meant to be displayed. So they could display anything really, pictures, numbers, anything that you would, could just pick out of a lineup with a light bulb. But they're dead. Nobody's going to use these things anymore. But I think there's a certain beauty to them, and there's a really appealing quality. And there's a lot of projects I can think of that would be a lot of fun to do with them. It would be fun to get a giant grid of these things, and if I could somehow make my own film, I have thought about trying to make like a Pac-Man game using them. Basically have separate ones for Pac-Man with his mouth open, closed, the dot, the 4 ghosts, and you could play a game using it, using a display made out of all these things. I think could be really fun. Well, there's all kinds of things that could be really fun, but I have no idea. Nobody makes these things anymore. This is pretty much long dead technology. And if you try Googling them, which I've tried many times to try to find out more information about them, whether they're called inline digital display units or single plane displays, I find a couple entries of people who sell some remaining ones from some old stock, but very few people have any real information about these things or where they were used. But they were clearly used at one time and served a very specific function once, and let's hear it for one plane displays, everybody. Alright, thanks for your time. I hope I didn't bore you too badly.